My name is Ryan Gensler. I'm assistant coach, coaching the women's basketball down the street at Dayton. I actually frequent your Chick-fil-A maybe once or twice a week, so I'm up here a lot. You guys got a nice one. You don't know how good you have it. You go down to some of the ones down south, East Coast. East Coast doesn't even have Chick-fil-A. You don't even know. I'm going into my 10th year coaching basketball, and what I'm talking to you guys a little bit about today is really the overall theme is, how to be a better teammate. And for us, I studied kind of what championship teams do, what championship behavior looks like, and obviously some championship teams, when you see them and they're celebrating at the end, they are unbelievable teammates. And we have a saying with our team at Dayton, we have 16 players on our roster this year. That's a pretty big roster for a basketball team, but we say that we're 16 strong, that we need all 16 players. And what that means is that, when one player is maybe not having a great day, someone else is there to pick them up. We need all 16. And one of the ways that we emphasize that is through power of touch. You see on the sheet there, I want to kind of give a disclosure about this, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to butcher it. But 4 years ago, when I really researched the science and everything behind this, I was studying NBA teams. There was a study that was done that I'll touch on in a couple minutes, and that was way before the hashtag Me Too movement, or as we see in the news, people have inappropriately touched one another. You go 2 seconds on being on CNN and see something in Hollywood or somewhere, but I don't want it to get misconstrued. What I'm talking about is wanted, appropriate in practice, in a game, like high fives, fist bumps, that kind of thing. If there is ever any unwanted touch, you need to tell someone that you trust. So I want to preface that first and foremost. I'm kind of a high five, fist pump kind of coach. I'm not a chest bump, butt slap, anything like that. I just don't want that to be misunderstood. Because I'm going to say some things like, we had 3,000 touches of practice, and it's that guy's a creep. No, that is totally not the direction that we're going with that. But I want to make sure that's first and foremost with how I say that. I need 2 volunteers to kind of start this. Can I get 2 volunteers? Just quick show of hands. If you're in the front, there you go. 1, you as well. You want to come up? All right, pop up on the stage here. Might be a little bit easier to see. All right, so what I need to have happen is I need one of you to stand facing me and the other one to stand facing the audience here. So why don't you stand facing the audience, all right, and why don't you stand here facing me, all right? I just want you to put out your hand. Put out your hand just like that, all right? So I'm going to display, and you can't turn around, all right? I'm going to display a word, and I need you to convey that message just by touching his hand. Are you all right with that? You all right with that? All right, so here's the first word that I want you to display and try to convey just by touching his hand. Very good, very good. All right, what do you think that is? What did she display to you? Kindness, sympathy was the word, so you're spot on. Very good job with that, actually. All right, let's get one more. Well, we've got 2 more, actually. All right, a little bit different there. What did that feel like? Aggressive? Was it positive or negative?
More like negative.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. All right, and then the last one here. What was that one?
That was more like excited.
That was spot on, actually. Let's give him a round of applause. That was the exact word. You guys are good. You can go back and have a seat. Thank you. That was pretty good. You guys nailed it. But as you can see, we can obviously portray without speaking to one another on a daily basis, just in our interactions and just how we actually communicate, even with just our body language and hands. I mean, she did an unbelievable job with the excitement. She was jumping up and down. That was pretty easy to tell, but you could tell just in the way that she interacted just with his hand. That's the message she was getting. So what's the science behind all this? All right, the science behind all this, and you've probably heard this before, is when there is human contact, there is a hormone that is released in our brain called oxytocin, all right? That is the hormone for social bonding and trust. All right, so there is an exact science for this. So where else do we see this in society, in every day? There are some really neat examples that if you kind of think about it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So babies when they're held, all right? The only other real time that oxytocin is released, like at a crazy amount, is like that mother to child, nurturing, hold the baby. They feel that trust and bond. That's why they're in those swaddling clothes, so they're like, still feel like they're compact and everything's good. There's been studies that students who get patted on the back, like as a teacher walks around the classroom and she's like, and do you know the answer to number 4? She's like, oh yeah. Like they're more likely to participate if a teacher taps a student on the back as they're going around the classroom. A doctor who holds a patient's hand and has to deliver bad news, like there is no fear with a patient when like a doctor, someone of power, someone who knows what they're talking about, holds a patient's hand. Like there's the fear is like leaving the patient until he delivers that news, and there's that trust and social bond between them. And then they actually like broke this down and put someone in one of those CAT scans, where like you're in the tube and you go back. And so it was one of those open ones, or an MRI, excuse me. One of those open ones, so they put the person's head back, right? And they were totally enclosed. They were looking straight back, and they had like a person there with them that they knew. And they told the person who had their head back, they said, we're gonna send a shock to your brain. And like, you're in one of those things, you can't really see anything, so they're like really tense, really nervous. And then like that you could see the like neurons moving, the fear and all those things. And then they had the person hold their hand. They said, we're going to shock you. And you could literally see in the imagery of the brain that the fear circuits just totally shut down because they trusted, they had that bond with that person that was there just by holding their hand. All right, so that's the why. And we know that in society, we've understood that background a little bit. So for me in basketball, a little bit about my background. I was at University of Florida down in Gainesville in the SEC for 2 seasons 3 years ago, and I was in a non-coaching role where I couldn't coach on the court. I was a video coordinator there, so I was part of the support staff. And so one of the things that we were trying to do is we wanted to do everything that we could to win a championship, an SEC championship. So we were trying to find a competitive advantage with people. And so I had studied the Golden State Warriors and a lot of the championship teams, and there were some studies out there about that they were leaders in the league of high fives. And I was like, who the heck is charting high fives for the NBA? What idiot is just watching a game, looking at high fives? I'm watching dunks, I'm watching reactions, I'm watching like all the stuff that goes on. Who is actually looking at high fives? But someone actually did and charted high fives. And so it was funny because I was watching the playoffs that year, and during the playoffs, the study was like evolving, and the teams that high-fived more were winning more. And then the 2 teams that had the top touches, high fives, chest bumps, teams that were the first ones to pick someone off the ground, ended up in the championship game. So you can see on your sheet, there's a picture, and this is from like the original study. Dallas Mavericks were playing the Miami Heat back when LeBron was there, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, those guys. And you can see there's a picture of Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. They're standing side by side in defense. And then Chris Bosh puts out his hand. And he puts out his hand to kind of measure where he is defensively. And for any of you basketball-minded people, like if you're playing defense, you want to be talking where you need to go, be closer to the ball, move, I got your back, I'm right here, those kind of things. So he actually touched him. He didn't just say it. He touched him to let Dwayne Wade know that he's got his back, he's right there. And then they ended up getting a defensive stand. And this is in the final minute of the game. The very next possession, Chris Bosh hits an open 3. Or it wasn't necessarily open. You can kind of see it. I mean, it's a little contested, but he puts a go-ahead 3, and they end up winning the game. Do you know who the touchiest player on the Miami Heat was? Chris Bosh. Like there was a direct correlation with that, and that rubs off. Did anyone see the Laker-Memphis game last night, or see any of the highlights from it? I know it's a West Coast game, so do you remember any of the highlights that you saw that were like in particular? Lakers played last night. So Lance Stephenson, the Lakers are up 20, right? They're up 20. It's like, I don't know, maybe the third quarter. Lance Stephenson, one of the Laker teammates to LeBron, is on a fast break, and he goes to throw a behind-the-back alley-oop to LeBron. Totally butchers it. Lance Stephenson, horrible pass, right? Doesn't even make it there. Memphis intercepts the ball, goes down the other way and scores. Luke Walton, the Lakers coach, calls timeout. So as they're walking to the bench, how do you think LeBron reacted to Lance Stephenson? You think he was upset with him? What do you think his reaction was? You know how fiery he is.
I don't think he probably wasn't mad.
He probably wasn't mad. So how did he portray that to Lance, that he probably wasn't mad and that was all right? Yeah, it was the first thing. Like the camera's cutting to commercial break, and LeBron goes over and just daps. Lance gives him my bad. LeBron goes, you're good. Gives him strong dap, and they head to the bench to recap. So to me, like that, you want to talk about leadership, you want to talk about things that matter, like that, it's LeBron. Like he could have just cussed him out. He could have rolled his eyes, looked the other way. He didn't even have to go over because they were on the other end of the court walking back to the bench. He could have just gone and sat down and did one of those huff and puff things from the bench. So to me, like that was a real life example. As I woke up this morning and saw Bleacher Report on my Instagram, I was like, holy cow, how poignant is that for today? So winning teams, obviously, they're touching more. Well, the counter to that is like, well, they're probably making more baskets. They probably have more things to celebrate. Like what happens on those negative plays like LeBron and Lance went through? Well, here's my rebuttal to that. If you have a culture of picking each other up and you have a culture of giving dap and celebrating, well, you will also have a culture on those negative plays so that your lows don't go to the depths that they could. Your bounce back time are better because you have that social bond. You have that trust between one another so that if you do make a bad play, it's not as bad as you would once think. Think of the worst team that you've ever been on. Think of the worst teammates that you've ever had and how they've made you feel when you make a bad play. Do you want to make the bad play? No, like you're just playing. Like sometimes those things happen, but to have someone criticize you or just to like not show you any love makes you feel awful. So think about making the worst play now on the best team you've ever been around with the best teammates that you've ever had. Think about your reaction now. It's like, all right, I got this. And that next possession is good. So obviously those positive plays, you want to carry that momentum. Celebrate it. Like we tell our kids all the time, we have an exhibition game tonight, our first like real dress rehearsal for the season. And one of the things that I will tell our kids before we take the court is like, you've just worked all summer, all fall. Like you need to celebrate good plays tonight. Like, yes, we have a certain level of expectation, but like you're allowed to smile. You're allowed to like laugh and enjoy. If you get an and one, you can celebrate it. And like sternly, yes, and one, scream it. I don't care. Go chest bump them. Do whatever you need to do to celebrate it. What if you weren't that person? What if you weren't that like eccentric person who's the and one, like pump my chest, give me a dap? Like, what if that's not you? What if you're not comfortable with that? What are some other ways that you can celebrate those things? There's a player on my team right now. She's from Australia. They do things a little different over there. I'm begging her every time that she gets an and one. I'm like, can you please just celebrate it? Just and one. And I was like, I literally tried to make her practice screaming like and one after her make, and she couldn't do it. It just wasn't in her nature. And I said, we need to agree on something that like when we get an and one, like I need to feel that you're into it. And she's like, how about we just do a really hard high five? And I was like, I'm good with that. So she gives me like the hardest high five now. Like it's like stern, and I'm just like, all right, I felt that. It wasn't some dead fish like, hey. But it was like, all right, I got you. So like it's different for everyone, but everyone can participate in it. And she's also there for her teammates when she's the first one to pick someone up. So even if you're not that loud, boisterous person, you can still contribute in a really positive way. So what does that mean for your team sport? Like, so I told you I studied it, right? I went total nerd on it. Like, broke down every practice we had, every game we had, what the numbers looked like. So obviously, if you go to a practice, is it the exact same amount of time that you practice every day? Like, I know it's around 2 hours, but is it 110 minutes? Is it 115 minutes? Is it like, it's different every day, right? Is it game time? Game time is always 40 minutes for basketball, right? Or, your football game is however many minutes it is, and that's real. So what I did was I broke down how many touches we had for an entire practice, and broke it down how many touches we had per minute. And I had a chart in our locker room that showed you on a daily basis what your touches per minute were, and we ranked our players. And it was amazing how competitive our players were at looking and see like, oh, that's something I can totally control. Maybe I didn't have a great practice. Maybe I'm the worst player on the team, but I can lead our team in touches. And they got super competitive with it. So you see on the bottom there's a graph. So that was our entire season. So the first game of the season, we played some, I don't know, shellac D1 team that was horrible. And, we were fine. Second game of the season at Florida, we played Florida State, who was ranked 8th in the country. What do you think, based on that graph, what the outcome of that game was? No, the one that spiked high. Yeah, that's that third game, my fault. Third game. Spiked really high? Yeah, we beat them by 20. All right? How do you think the rest of the season went? All right, right? So we would make a point to our players and be like, listen, when we beat Florida State, obviously we had a lot to celebrate, but look where that average is. So how the heck could we ever have 1,200 less touches on a conference game when we're playing Vanderbilt than when we played Florida State? Isn't that absurd? 1,200 less touches? Like that's a lot. That's significant. So that's kind of like, that was our energy barometer. So on those games that we didn't have a lot of energy, it was like, we need to get our touches up, guys. Like, huddles need to be tighter. When you come off the bench, go and dap everyone twice. We need to do it. I had a manager that year say, like, you know what? We had a 6 a.m. practice, and he's like, you know what? I never thought about it. You always talk about, like, dapping up other people and everything. He's like, did you ever just clap to yourself? And he's like, it's like you're giving yourself social trust in a bond. And I was like, dude, you are way out there, but you're almost kind of right. So we start our practices every day with an 8-minute drill. It's a shooting drill. Our kids know it, but it is our, like, energy barometer. And we line up our managers to each line. There are 2 lines. We line up managers, we line up coaches, and our players go and shoot a shot, and then they go through the line. The other one comes and shoots a shot, goes through the lines, and we get dap to start our practice because we don't want our practices to start real soft. So one of the things that we realized was, like, let's use our managers. If you are injured, well, unless your hand's injured, like, you could probably stand there. You don't need to sit at the scorer's table or on the sideline. Get to a spot where you can give a lot of people dap, or you can stationarily, they can come and give you dap. All right, so there are ways to build this in with your teams to try to raise your energy and raise, that profile for you guys. So those were a little bit about the numbers. Other different kinds of leaders. So I told you about the one who demanded to have, like, a really stern high five. We also had a really quiet point guard. Point guard for our hoops team is like quarterback for a football team. Super quiet. Best player we had. We always told her, we need you to talk more. She was so soft-spoken. She, like, grew up on a farm in Cookeville, Ohio. Like, most soft-spoken kid, absolute killer on the court. But what we realized after we kind of brought this to the attention of everyone, every single huddle or every single drill, she always had an arm around someone's back talking softly in their voice. So she didn't need to be loud and boisterous. She just needed to be herself. But there are different ways to do that within yourself. So we said it's built into our culture. In one of our, like, many talks, we have 30 games a season for basketball. So when it's my scout for a game, I give a pregame talk. And one of our pregame talks before our conference tournament last year, we're looking at a team on the other side that's, like, pretty similar to us. Like, it's going to be a close game. And I told them our culture has to matter. Like, if there is going to be a scoreboard for anything in life, win it. Does our culture exceed their culture? Like, is our culture better than theirs? And everyone in the room agreed. Yes, our culture is better. Like, we put value in high fives. Like, that's ridiculous. We're counting high fives in practice. Who the heck else is counting high fives in practice? But that is ingrained in our culture that we're going to be connected and there for one another. So we're already up 1 in the scoreboard. So when we're out there in layup lines and we're looking down the other end and they're just jacking shots or, like, they're going through and we've got people stationed for high fives, like, our culture already matters. We're already up. Have the confidence to know that. All right? And one of the things that I look at in for the future, like, we're such a texting, phone, like, non-face-to-face type community where it's, like, non-interpersonal. like make sure this is ingrained in your teams because it's not a normal art. When I went through high school, we would see people in the hallway, we'd give them dap, we'd have our own handshakes, we would do all those kind of things. Like, bring that back, keep that relevant, keep that within your teams to make it matter because there is a science behind it. And if you are a true competitor that wants to win championships, you will do whatever it takes to do it. Like that Kobe Mamba mentality, like I don't give a crap what I look like, what color the shoes is, what it's designed. If it's gonna help me get better, I'm going to do it. And that's the kind of message that we brought to our team and our kind of culture. So I think I touched a little bit on everything within this handout. Definitely review it. I put my email address on there for you guys. If you have any questions, if you talk to one of your coaches and it's like, hey, this tall guy from Dayton came and talked to us about high fives. I can't remember it, but it sounded like it could help our team. Have your coaches reach out to me in an email. I've got a whole template of things that I can give them to help you guys. But just being here this morning means two things. It means that you care about your teams. It means you care about your culture. And you obviously care about winning championships because you're willing to learn from some of the great speakers that Mr. Bose brings in for you. So you're already ahead of the game. Make that matter as you guys tackle your sports.
1,